Hello, everybody. Uh, think I'm live now, which is a good sign. We had a spinning wheel for a while, so I'm hoping that everything is good and we're all live, and that's exciting. Welcome to another episode of Here for It Live Q&A with Connor. I am this show's only character, Connor. Uh, I hope that you are all doing excellent while I wait for some people to come in. Connor, I'm new around here. How do we start our Q&As? The answer obviously is, as has always been, I discuss my own opinion on how the weather has been. Connor, how the weather? It's hot. It's hot, and I know I've been saying that since this started because we started it in like June, and so it's been hot. And it was a little bit rainy earlier this week. That was nice. We like a little rain. Still hot, too hot. Okay, leave your sweatshirts at home unless you're me, in which case, wear your sweatshirts literally every day of your life. Because that's you dress for the weather you want, not the weather you got. That's the weather rundown. Look at all these people tuning in. This is spectacular. Okay. This week, I had a question that I'm actually going to kind of turn into a couple of questions and discussions. All right. Um, so the question that I received was actually about service animals. All right. Which is something that we've seen at this agency kind of more and more. And there are a couple of things that I kind of want to break down, right? Um, what this question's asking for is, hey, what do we do if somebody is saying that there is a service animal, one of our clients, a service animal that they are utilizing, but this dog is not service animal trained, right? Um, it is not a service dog, and I think that does lead me to a couple of points I want to make first about service animals. All right. Um, for those of you who don't know, there is a difference between a service animal and an emotional support animal. An emotional support animal is generally speaking easier to obtain. That is usually all that's needed. There is a letter, some sort of confirmation or attestation from a physician or a licensed psychologist or psychiatrist, psychiatric nurse, anybody who handles kind of mental health or physical health can fill out a form for an emotional support animal, and that oftentimes allows them more protections in something like a living space, an apartment building, a home, something that you are renting. Um, Importantly, emotional support animals usually does not allow them any special access. There are varying rules, and I'm not going to get into all of the legalities of it because that would be a really long time and probably not something that is going to see an incredible amount of benefit. But suffice to say, there are actually a number of different rules that apply to emotional support animals that I'm not going to go into here, but there are limited protections for emotional support animals. Service animals are different. All right. One of the kind of hallmarks of service animals is that they have to go through a considerable amount of training. There are certain breeds of dogs that are pretty distinct, typically used for service animals. Labradors, golden retrievers, German shepherds. These are more common breeds of dogs. Hey, happy to have you. These are common breeds of dogs, largely because they are easily trained. They are of an appropriate size and height that allows them to navigate or a individual, right? Generally speaking, are larger, and they need to be trained. There are specialized training programs that service animals have to go through, and that's very dependent on the kind of service animals have to go through, and that's very dependent on the kind of service that they are going to be doing with somebody, right? An emotional support animal can sometimes be a pretty blanket term, but a service animal is going to have a specific kind of thing that it does, right? Um, if there are issues with vision, you're going to have a seeing eye dog, right? And this is a dog that has been specially trained to be able to navigate and help somebody get through spaces, right? And it's also easily identifiable. Um, there are dogs that do help. They are specific service animals that can help detect things like seizures or blood sugar levels or all kinds of different things, right? And that's not like an innate ability of dogs. It's not like a super dog or anything. It receives a lot of training from accredited programs that can train service animals, right? It is, and I mean this in the nicest way. It is typically pretty easy to identify whether or not a service animal has actually been trained, right? There are behaviors that service animals are typically not going to do unless under incredible distress, right? Things like barking and biting. They are usually trained to allow their owner to know if they need to utilize the restroom. They're not probably not going to use they I imagine dogs aren't like, "Oh, father, I need to use the lavatory," or something like that. But, if they need to make, uh, typically, they will have a way of notifying, their owner. These are behaviors that are really specific. This is not an accident that a dog is well behaved like this, right? They've received extensive training. So, Connor, what do I do if I have a client or somebody who is saying I have a service animal and they are decidedly not a service animal? How do I approach it? One of the ways that I have done this in the past is there are some sort of specific animals, questions that I can ask. The easiest one for me to go through and try to talk to my client about, try to get some knowledge on, is what work, task, or service has the dog been trained to perform, right? And for those of you who are afraid of legalities, that is absolutely a question that can be asked and still meet ADA accommodations, all right? Because they are supposed to be able to identify what the service for the service animal is. What has it been trained for? And again, these are going to be specific, right? There are specific tasks that these animals have been trained to do, and so somebody's going to be able to articulate that. And if they cannot, that raises, I think, some real concerns, right? Um, there are other behaviors that can, I think, lend itself, and other ways that I have addressed these with clients, right? Is if we are out to the store, because this is what the question kind of follows up to ask. If we're out at the store and the service animal needs to, again, I use the term service animal. It would appear, at least per this question, the service animal is probably not a licensed, properly trained service animal. The service animal will make the service animal will do what it needs to do, right? If I learned one thing from Jurassic Park, is that when you gotta go, you gotta go. Not something that most places will allow us to do, right? Um, or if it is a service animal and it is beginning to do stuff, hey, what kind of programs can we participate in to either retrain or rework? In this instance, the animal's training and service, because it is beginning to not be of help any longer. It's beginning to become a barrier, and that is oftentimes a conversation that people are a little bit more willing to have. I don't want to talk about how, like the pet's not doing something, but it's becoming a barrier to service delivery, right? We have had instances. I know that in this case, um, this is decidedly not what the question is asking. It says, there hasn't been an instance of the animal going to the bathroom in the home, but when they're at stores or hallways, it can do that. Well, that's going to create, especially if it's happening in the home or in hallways in the apartment building, that can over time actually create an eviction risk, right? And so I want to address that with the client and say, hey, you know what? Not apartments usually don't take kindly to this kind of stuff sitting around, and they probably know who is doing it. So we're going to need to either fix that behavior or we're going to need to take some measures to make sure that it's not happening. However, we did also have recently a case where a client had a service animal that, again, from everything that we can say, it's completely undocumented with any services. It also appears to be completely untrained, and there is no articulation for what specific service this dog was completing, but it was causing a hygiene issue in the home, in the apartment, in the bed, in the chairs, on the floor. And it was causing real genuine health issues, right? You can't sleep in a bed that's full of feces, whether that's from you or from your dog. It doesn't matter. Feces is feces, right? Um, and so we kind of had to make a report on that, right? Like at a certain point, this is self-neglect. Um, I want to be really clear. Okay, you guys, well, watch this. Just in case anyone needs proof. I'm a pet guy, okay? This is Zoe. She's, if for those of you who haven't seen her, she's perfect in every way, and I adore her. So I want to say this is somebody who is a big pet guy, okay? I cannot hang that back up. It's gonna sit here. She's gonna do the rest of the training right now. Um, I want to say this. I am very attached to Zoe. I'm attached to my dog. I've always been attached to my pets, and I think that that is very normal and natural for all of our clients, right? Oftentimes, the reason that somebody may say I have a service animal is because they are afraid of being parted with that animal, right? And I want to be honest and say, man, I get that. I totally understand. And so I want to approach this in as human of a way as I possibly can, and say I know probably why they may be saying this, and I know they probably can identify ways that their dog has helped them, right? Which I fair, valid, and I'm not here to invalidate any of that. However, there comes a point where it becomes a potential barrier. It becomes an issue, right? If I am working with a client and their dog continues to have accidents, that's why haven't I been using that term the entire training, man, Connor? And I have dogs continuing to do accidents. When we are shopping in a store, at the end of the day, I have to have a conversation with my client about how, regardless, that could really get us kind of unable to utilize this store anymore, right? Um, it's not going to be the most fun conversation of your entire life. I'm going to tell you that right now. And I can't really, at the end of the day, prove necessarily that a client's dog is not a service animal, but I can have an honest conversation about the limitations and barriers that the animal's behavior is creating towards services, and that barrier sometimes extends to our ability to continue to work with them, right? If we have a service animal that is clearly becoming a barrier and preventing our clients from getting into places, not because it's a well-trained service animal that these places are trying to accommodate, but because it is a household pet that a client is claiming as a service animal in order to get into spaces where it ought not to be. That's going to eventually lead us to maybe need to look at, is this an independence issue? Is this something that we can continue to help our clients be independent with if uh they aren't willing to concede that this is a barrier, right? Um I am not I understand that I can't flat out go and people won't flat out ask, hey, why do you need this animal? That's not something that can be asked. But I think that broaching the subject with what are the services that this animal is supposed to be doing to assist you, and then having an honest, I think, conversation about, is it actually doing those services, is a way to at least broach the topic. Is it going to go again? Our client's going to say, "Oh, yay! I'm so glad that you're confronting me about the fact that my dog, who's not a service animal, but I've been saying is now pottying in the store and it's going to cause issues. I don't imagine that's going to be awesome. I don't imagine most clients are going to say, "Yay, this is fun." But it is, I think, a good conversation to have. And I think that we can press and then we can say, "Okay, fine." We can press a little bit more and we can say, "Okay, fine." Right? Sometimes it is consistently bringing up concerns and issues. Sometimes it is laying out for them, "Hey, this is not something that typical service animals do, and it's going to begin to impede your ability to interact with the community." Um, you don't necessarily need to dance around it, right? I think that it is fair to say, with the services that you say this dog is supposed to be doing, and me not seeing anything, any of those services, is this dog meeting your needs, and is this, really the appropriate way to be utilizing this animal in general? Um, again, there's only so much tact that I can have. At the end of the day, it is a difficult, tricky conversation, and I can't control how my clients are going to respond. I know I say that a lot when I'm talking about having difficult conversations with my clients, but it is 100% true. I can't control the way that they are going to feel about the information that I'm bringing up to them. And they may respond well and they may respond poorly, but I need to get that information out. I need to get my concerns raised. So, as an incredibly long winded way to answer your question, how do I broach the subject? I would say ask questions around service. What was this dog trained to do as a service for you? And is it still doing those services? On top of that, I would say addressing it through barriers and saying, "Hey, you know what? Service animals typically are not trained to go to the bathroom just anywhere, right? Are you missing signals? Or do we need to have an honest conversation about their fitness to go into the stores with us, right?" So I think that is how I would kind of address this. Be honest. Understand that may not be taken the best, that being confronted with this is not going to always go great. What I would say is this, right? um I my calling into question the sort of veracity of their claim that this is a service animal is not in any way me trying to say I'm not here to support you and I'm not here to help you and I don't want to continue to do that, right? I don't want it to ever come across that I'm not looking to appreciate your pet, but I do think that it is looking to cause potential barriers to you living as independently as possible. I think oftentimes some of that nervousness and anger comes out because, well, I don't really, I don't know what you want to do. I don't want to lose my pet, but I also don't want to lose you as a support, right? So I'd say coming at it from an angle that, look, I'm really just looking out for your well-being and the well-being of your pet. But we can't be, saying it's service animal if it's not doing a service. And it is going to create barriers down the road if it continues to engage in behaviors that it ought not to do. So that's how I would address it. Again, is it going to be like a 10 out of 10 conversation? I do doubt it. But is it a conversation that I think is important to have? Yes, you can have it in bits and pieces. You can start with that simple question that, again, like for those of you who are thinking, Connor, now I'm no lawyer. But that is absolutely totally fine to ask, what work, task, or service has this dog been trained to do, right? Because if it's not doing that kind of stuff, then I'm going to need to address the fact that maybe it needs a retraining, or maybe it is no longer really capable of doing that service any longer, right? Does not invalidate the pet. Let's keep them. I love dogs. Um, but I do want to address it from a service perspective and say it is becoming a barrier to services. And it's not because I don't want to work with service animals. I've worked with actual service animals, and you can tell, right? They are trained for this. And those that aren't can really cause barriers and difficulties for our clients. So approach it from a human perspective, approach it kindly, but I would say clarity is kindness in this instance. Be clear that, I think that it could cause barriers to services. And especially if you see their animal causing hygiene issues at home, right? Again, we had an instance where the dog was kind of going to the bathroom sort of throughout the house, and that wasn't getting cleaned up, so that was contaminating the air and the surfaces. Um, that's again, clarity here is me being kind and saying, I think that this is creating a real health and safety risk for you. And we're either going to need to find some way to address that, mitigate it, or it's going to be something that, unfortunately, I'm probably going to need to be reporting. Right? That's Connor's answer. Hey, you know what? Spectacular question. We've been getting more questions about service animals or animals that are, what's an emotional support animal? What's a service animal? This person's claiming it's a service animal, but man, it really does not appear to be capable of any services, but it is pooping in the bed a lot, right? And so I think this is just kind of my blueprint for how to handle it. Be clear, ask that question, approach it from an integrated independence and service perspective, and do so kindly, right? That's I got one question this week, and then that was a very good one. So thank you for sending the question in. I hope that this is helpful. If you guys have any other questions or anything about service animals in particular, or if you ever work with a client who is curious, maybe I do need a service animal. What is the process for that? Those are all things that I'm happy to help with, to send resources to talk about. But I really like this question because I know that it's uncomfortable, but I know that it is, more common than we might suspect. So excellent question. Thank you all for tuning in. I know this was a little bit of a shorter one, but I really appreciate it. This week only, this week only, this week only. I think you think we all get to have a little bit of a send off with my adorable little dog. Look at her; she's all tucked in. So I hope you guys have a great night. Both Zoe and I wish you. Yes, I will reach out to you. Thank you for asking. I will reach out. For those of you, I see hearts coming, and that's very, very good. She's adorable and worthy of it. Look at how cute she is. I hope you all have a spectacular night. And I will see you guys next week for another edition of Here For It. I'm Connor, as always. I am here for it, and I will talk to you guys later. Have a good one.